Hello friends, I welcome you all to today's lecture on Debts under Hindu Law, Doctrine of Pious Obligation and Antecedent Debts. The basic aim of this lecture is to study debts under Mitakshara Law, Doctrine of Pious Obligation under Mitakshara Law, concept of antecedent debt and debts under Dayabhaga Law. A debt may be incurred on one's account or through someone else. A karta of a joint Hindu family may incur or contract a debt for necessity or benefit of the family. In case it is incurred through someone else, its liability arises from a legal duty. In such cases, the person incurring the debt is working as an agent of the person paying the debt. When a person receives property of another as doni, his liability to pay debts of another arises on a moral ground. Such liability is indirect liability. Lastly, the liability arises from a religious duty, as when a son is required to pay his father's debts in order to save his father from falling into sin of non-payment. Debts under Mitakshara Law. According to Mitakshara Law, the sons are liable to pay debts contracted by their father for his personal benefit during the lifetime of their jointness, provided the debts are not tainted with illegal or immoral purposes. Heir's liability. One who inherits the property of another must pay the debts incurred by such other person. Consequently, a Hindu heir is liable to pay the debts of the deceased out of the property he has inherited from the deceased. Such liability of an heir is, however, limited to the extent or value of the property inherited by him. Heir is neither an executor nor an administrator of the property inherited by him. He is therefore not liable to distribute rateably amongst the creditors of the deceased. It is not his duty to do so. In such cases, he has to prove that the property inherited by him is insufficient to pay the debts. All those persons who get the property of the deceased either by way of testamentary succession or intestate succession are included in the term heir. Section 123 of the Transfer of the Property Act says that a universal donee is liable to pay his donor's debts to the extent of the property received by him. Liability for co-partner's debts. It is the legal duty of every co-partner to pay his debts. A creditor who has obtained a decree against a debtor co-partner can get such co-partner's divided interest attached and sold in execution of the decree. If the creditor fails to execute his decree during the lifetime of such a co-partner, he will be without any remedy, because such a co-partner's share on his death will pass to other co-partners by survivorship. However, if such a share is attached by the creditor in debtor's, that is, co-partner's lifetime, it may be sold after his death. Such a debt may be of any kind, that is, it may have been incurred for a moral purpose or for an immoral purpose. Liability of a son, including grandsons and great-grandsons, to pay his father's debts. Such liability falls into two divisions. Number first, liability after partition, and number second, liability before partition. The second kind of liability may be in respect of the debts incurred as a manager of the family, or it may be in respect of the father's personal debts. So far as the debts incurred by a father after partition or separation between himself and his sons, sons do not incur any liability. However, if the debts in question is a pre-partition debt, the sons would be liable even after partition. If a suit is filed against a father before partition, the liability of the sons stands for such pre-partition debt. However, if the father is sued after partition, the decree in such a suit cannot be executed against the son. Under the circumstances, a separate suit is to be filed against the son. If the father is sued after partition for a pre-partition debt and the father dies pending the suit, as a consequence whereof the separated son is brought on record and the suit is decreed, the son's liability would be fixed in execution proceedings. Such a liability would be in proportion to the property obtained by sons as a result of partition, and no separate suit against the son is required to be filed for this purpose. Doctrine of pious obligation. Where a Hindu father, as a manager of the joint Hindu family, incurs a debt for legitimate family purposes, the debt will be binding on his sons, grandsons and great-grandsons to the extent of the co-partnership interest in the property. Hindu law thus imposes an obligation or duty upon the sons, grandsons and great-grandsons to pay out of the family property and debts of their ancestors. However, the debts should not be tainted with illegality or immorality or barred by the law of limitation. The sons, etc., are liable to pay these debts even though they are not incurred for a legal necessity or for the benefit of the estate. This doctrine is peculiar to Hindu law. The pious obligation of the son stems from an obligation of religion and piety of the son to rescue his father from the sin of non-payment. This doctrine is not merely religious, but it has passed into the realm of law. As to the origin of this doctrine, the Supreme Court in Siddheshwar Mukherjee versus Bhubneshwar Prasad said, I quote, "This doctrine, as is well known, has its origin in the conception of Simriti writers, who regard non-payment of debt as a positive sin, the evil consequence of which follow the undischarged debtor even in the afterworld. It is for the purpose of rescuing the father from torments in the next world that an obligation is imposed upon the sons to pay their father's debts. This doctrine, as formulated in the original text, has indeed been modified in some respects by judicial decisions. Under the law as it now stands, the obligation of the sons is not a personal obligation existing irrespective of the receipt of any assets. It is a liability confined to the assets received by them as his share in the joint family property or his interest in the same. The obligation exists whether the sons are major or minor, or whether the father is alive or dead. If the debts have been contracted by the father and they are not immoral or illegal, the interest of the sons in the co-partnership property can always be made liable for such debts." Unquote. It was observed by the Privy Council in Satnarayan versus Shri Krishan Das. This doctrine is not based for the benefit of the creditors or for the protection of the third parties. It is based on the pious obligation of the sons to see their father's debts paid. However, it has now passed into the realm of law from merely remaining a religious doctrine. This doctrine is a necessary and logical corollary to the doctrine of the son's right by birth to a share in the ancestral property. In Devidas versus Jadaram, it was held that the father dying during the lifetime of the son's grandfather does not reduce the son's liability to pay his father's debt. The doctrine of pious obligation is integral part of the old Mitakshara school of Hindu law, wherein the sons from the moment of their birth acquire along with their father an interest in the joint family property. Hindu Succession Amendment Act 2005. After the commencement of the Hindu Succession Amendment Act 2005, no court shall recognize any right to proceed against a son, grandson or great-grandson for the recovery of any debt due from his father, grandfather or great-grandfather solely on the ground of the pious obligation under the Hindu law of such son, grandson or great-grandson to discharge any such debt, provided that in the case of any debt contracted before the commencement of the Hindu Succession Amendment Act 2005, nothing contained in this subsection shall affect the right of any creditor to proceed against the son, grandson or great-grandson as the case may be, or any alienation made in respect of or in satisfaction of any such debt, and any such right or alienation shall be enforceable under the rule of pious obligation in the same manner and to the same extent as it would have been enforceable as if the Hindu Succession Amendment Act 2005 had not been enacted. Nothing contained in this section shall apply to a partition which has been effected before the 20th day of December 2004. For the purposes of this section, partition means any partition made by execution of a deed of partition duly registered under the Registration Act 1908 or partition effected by a decree of a court. Now friends, we will discuss antecedent debt. In Hindu law, the antecedent debt implies antecedent in point of time and antecedent in fact or in nature. Antecedent debt must be truly independent of and not part of the transaction impeached. Suppose a debt is incurred at the time of sale or mortgage, then it is not an antecedent debt. Such a debt must exist prior to and independently of such a sale or mortgage. In other words, the previous debt must not be part of the subsequent transaction. The two debts must be in reality independent, separate and distinct. For example, A, the father of a joint Hindu family, borrows rupees 2000 from X for his own use. He thereafter executes a mortgage of the joint Hindu family property to X in order to secure the debt. That the father used the money borrowed for immoral purposes is not proved. The mortgage binds the father's interest as well as his son's interest. The debt here is antecedent of the mortgage in fact as well as in time. The Privy Council in Brij Narayan Rai versus Mangala Prasad drew a distinction between a simple personal money debt and a debt received by a mortgage of immovable property, and the same has been approved by the Supreme Court in Amrit Lal Nagji versus Jayanti Lal. As expressed in the Girdhari Lal case, for the payment of his personal debts, the father can alienate the whole of the co-parcenary property, but the debts must be antecedent and not contracted for an immoral or illegal purpose. Such alienations bind the sons whether they consent or not, or whether the father is or is not the manager of the joint family, or whether the joint family is or is not composed of persons other than the father and sons. The right of the father is additional to his ordinary right as a manager to charge or alienate the property in case of legal necessity. A father can charge or alienate the property for discharging his antecedent debt. This is the privilege. But a manager of the family who is not the father has no such right. An uncle professing to act on behalf of a family cannot have such a right unless he proves that the transactions entered into by the father and grandfather of the plaintiff were not for legal necessity. The position has been clearly summarized in Brij Narayan case as: the managing member of a joint undivided estate cannot alienate or burden the estate qua manager except for the purposes of legal necessity. If he is the father and the members are the sons, he may, by incurring debt, so long as it is not for immoral purpose, lay estate open to be taken in execution proceedings upon a decree for payment of the debt. If he purports to burden the estate by mortgage, then unless that mortgage is to discharge an antecedent debt, it would not bind the estate. Antecedent debt means antecedent in fact as well as in time. That is, the debt must be truly independent of and not part of the transaction impeached. There is no rule that this result is affected by the question whether the father who contracted the debt or burdened the estate is alive or dead. Debts under Dayabhaga law. Compared to the Mitaksha law of debts, the Dayabhaga law of debts is simpler. Under this rule, the sons and grandsons have no special liability as they have under the Mitaksha school. Reasons for this difference are quite apparent. Under Dayabhaga school, each member takes a defined share in the property, while under the Mitaksha law, it is not so. Under Dayabhaga school, property passes to the heirs by succession. The co-partners do not take any interest by survivorship. The doctrine of pious obligation is not recognized under Dayabhaga law. Old Mitaksha law recognized this principle, but in 2005, this principle has been abolished by an amendment in Hindu Succession Act. Under the Dayabhaga school, the whole property in the hands of the father and grandfather and great-grandfather is liable for the father's debts and can be attached and sold during their lifetime. After their death, a creditor can follow the property in whatever hands it may have gone. The reason is that in this school, the nature of the debt does not affect the creditor's right, and moral or legal debt is as much binding upon the debtor and his legal representatives as illegal or immoral debts. The manager can contract debts for business and family purposes, and such debts bind all the members of the family. When a loan is taken for private purpose, the rules as regards the liability to pay it are: the separate property of debtor is liable for payment of his debts in his lifetime as well as after his death. Under this school, each co-partner takes a defined share in the property of the family, and on his death, it passes to his heirs by succession and not by survivorship. Such interest in the property is liable for the payment of his debts during the lifetime as well as after his death. The sons, grandsons and great-grandsons do not acquire any interest in the ancestral property by birth. The father therefore can sell or mortgage even the whole of the ancestral property in his hands for the payment of his debts, irrespective of the character of his debts. On a Hindu dying leaving debts, his heirs are bound to pay these debts out of the property left by the deceased. However, they are not personally liable for such debts. To conclude, pious obligation means the moral liability of sons to pay off or discharge their father's debts. The debts borrowed may not be of legal necessity or for the benefit of estate. Thus, if the father is the karta of a Hindu joint family, he may alienate the co-partner's property for discharging the antecedent debts. The sons are under the obligation to recover such alienated property by repaying the debts. The ancient doctrine of pious obligation was governed by Smriti law. There was a pious obligation on the sons and grandsons to pay the debts contracted by the father and grandfather. The doctrine of pious obligation is not recognized under Daya-Bhaga law. Old Mitakshara law recognized this principle, but in 2005, this principle has been abolished by an amendment in Hindu Succession Act. Under the Daya-Bhaga school, the whole property in the hands of the father and grandfather and great-grandfather is liable for the father's debts and can be attached and sold during their lifetime. After their death, a creditor can follow the property in whatever hands it may have gone. With this, I conclude today's lecture. Hope you have enjoyed this session. Thank you.